Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining this episode of the Intrato Way. Today we have special guest star Thomas Squeo, who is the CTO of Intrato, which used to be called West. So if you hear West or Intrato, those are the same company now. My experience with Intrato is that they are the only customer we have with a great program for delivering. If you would like to move to CI, if you would like to move to machine learning, anything, they have a program for delivering it to developers on the ground. And this is part of Thomas's remit. And so we wanted to ask him about it. And we're just going to ask the flat, hard question. Hey, everyone wants to do what you do, and they even say they do some of the things you're doing, but they can't convert. How come Intrato has been able to convert on this process, training 60 teams, 100 applications? How do we do it?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this, Tony. I do appreciate it. I'd love to talk about where we are on our journey. And we're not done. So we're only about halfway through our program journey. And what we do have, like you said, a kind of a repeatable process that we kind of look at for all of our initiatives. So we started this process in a kind of a crawl, walk, run model. When I joined the organization as the role of chief architect in 2016, it was really operating more in an ITIL model than anything else. So kind of traditional plan, build, run, more of a traditional telco. So the organization was, in many ways hostile to both agile and public cloud, and a lot of the kind of the more experimental software development practices, as well as also kind of the application of machine learning in a production environment. So there would be a lot of data analysis happening, but it wouldn't necessarily be full circle from the kind of the crisp DM kind of world and that kind of thing. So as we started to look at this as a project, one of the requests that I had gotten was, how do we make our private cloud environment, which was virtualized using VMware's vSphere, vRealize, and all those aspects of that technology. So what we did is we did a selection process in the crawl phase around, does a platform as a service make sense? Who are the major vendors out there? Let's do a bake-off. Let's show that we can actually operate one of these environments. And one of the things we wanted to do was we were very much committed that it had to be able to move workloads between those cloud environments and our on-prem environment without having it be a significant lift. So obviously from that process, it kind of came down to either Cloud Foundry or Pivotal's Cloud Foundry at that point. So we really were keen on the opinionated nature of the platform, and that opinionated nature gave us enough constraints that I could give teams the latitude to operate without necessarily getting into how they were developing code. So ultimately what happens is that those teams are now able to make local technology selection decisions and approach decisions and so on and so forth. But then we were managing it from an operational management perspective. Yeah. So in that early phase, we had pulled together a cross-functional team of architects, engineers, operators, product developers, and so on into a common kind of war room for that POC, where everybody had an opportunity to kick the tires, talk about what worked, talk about what didn't work, so on and so forth. From there, we made a very, very modest decision to go and say, hey, we're going to go after 10 applications in a portfolio of 600. And that 10 applications of that portfolio of 600 was really built around a business case. I had a role around transformation at the time where I had an opportunity to really get involved with the strategy of the business, as well as also our FP&A teams, all of the general managers and the segment presidents and so on and so forth. So rather than kind of come at them from a technical perspective, I very rarely would ever have any discussion about them around technology related items at all. So I would kind of look at it from the technology is actually kind of that's rarely the dimension we lose on. That's rarely the dimension that projects fail from. But if you look at technology, the people, the process, the competencies that were necessary, what were the kind of the dependencies between teams to be able to make any of these kind of things happen. But ultimately what happened was, if we were in a cloud environment, we were fine. If we were in a public-private cloud environment, we were fine. But if we needed to cross those cloud environments to be able to move traffic, that's when things got messy, because that was when we dealt with InfoSec and networking and firewall rules and all these kind of things that kind of creep in where they could be automated, but they might not have the same engineering mindset and how they're actually managed.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we really needed to do was the POC kind of selected the technology. And as we moved from a POC to an actual, business value capture, we had to deal with like, hey, we're going to do a SIP of the license. And then we actually doubled the size of our license agreement in the form of an enablement program. So we spent, about $1 million on software, and we spent about $2 million on enablement. And that enablement was specifically around how do I get a platform team that's able to manage a platform for the organization? What are the processes? What is the capability and maturity of that team? How do we actually get them to kind of come up on that curve?
Yep.
And then what was the actual way we were going to get teams to be able to go from like, hey, I got an app into Pivotal versus I've got an app that is fully elastic inside Pivotal.
Yeah.
And that was everything from service instances to app instances to
Yep.
Foundry to dependent tiles and all the kind of those things. So that was really kind of that early stage. So,
Can I dig into some of this? Because
sure, yeah,
we're just like, oh, we got on our bike and we rode across the country. Like, how did you prep for that? How did you, like, everyone can say, hey, I would love that story to go like that, but yours is the only story that goes like that. So let's see if we can break it down at layers. From the board and executive layer, what did you have to do to start? They say, hey, figure out how to make us as attractive as off-prem cloud.
Right.
Okay. When they say that, what are they giving you? Is there this is just do a POC and report back to us? You have 3 years to do this.
No, definitely not. So what we did was we had, so the remit really was around kind of those first few applications, being able to kind of see and test. The organization was in the process of moving from a holding company model to an operating company model. So that meant that we had an opportunity to do a significant more centralization of decision-making, be able to kind of streamline things. When things were in a segment and a business unit model, you had people that were very P&L focused and would be like, hey, I want features, I don't want technical debt reduction. They were like, look, I will deal with more baling wire and duct tape in order to hit my number. And I don't care about the wake of wreckage behind me from technical.
Right, yeah.
And so what we did was we were like, look, we had businesses that we acquired, we as West, now Intrato, acquired, that were cloud native, that were in the cloud first. They never had a legacy on-prem kind of mindset and so on and so forth. And people would look at them and go, well, why are they different? What are they doing different? How is this operating? And a lot of people were like, that can't happen here. And it was like, well, no, you bought the company. It is happening here.
Yeah.
If we take away that team's capability to be fast and agile and nimble, they will destroy themselves because they will leave. They'll go take new opportunities, and we won't be able to get the advantage of the learning associated with them.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why we were able to kind of take that model was instead of going and saying, hey, I've got to roll my own without ever having seen, it's kind of like if you're going to cook a recipe, but you never had the meal before.
Right.
We couldn't do that. So what we did was we said, hey, you know what? We have teams inside our organization that have done this before. We have exemplars in the organization. Let's not start with a blank slate. Let's go and take what they've done and see where it does and doesn't work for our needs.
Yeah.
So we, at that point, had an opportunity to go and say, all right, let's use our own internal knowledge that might be underutilized. One of the things I think is interesting is there's a guy named Adrian Cockcroft out there.
We know
and he's a badass. And the thing that was interesting was when he was at Netflix, he would consistently tell executives from other teams where I got these people from your teams. How are they able to do this? I let them do it. And that's kind of a model that when I learned that kind of mindset, I was like, hey, you know what? We have talented people. Let's get all the bureaucracy out of their way. And one of the things I look at my role as, and as well as also my executive team's role as, and every one of my platform owners and so on and so forth in the organization, is it's their job to remove toil and remove bullshit from people's way.
Wow.
That is it.
How did you get to, right? Everyone could take this advice and move from, the productivity they're at to 10x productivity today if they had that mindset.
The executive sponsor has to be willing to stake their career on. That's it.
Yep.
So when you asked how the board was willing to fund this, how our FP&A and our CFO was it willing to fund this, is I put my name on the table and I said, if this program doesn't work, you have my badge. I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that I believe that this way of working is ultimately valuable enough to the enterprise that we would get there. And so what we did was we had a frozen middle. We had executives and directors that would be actively in sabotage of where we were wanting to go.
Yep.
They're no longer with us.
Okay.
You know, they've moved on to other places, because when you see it working and you've kind of, you know, been a naysayer for so long, it's kind of like, well, do you change with us or do you kind of, you know, move on? And some of them have made good decisions to move on, you know, and that was okay, because that ended up being you know, good for our organization at the end of the day.
I'd offer one other pattern too that Thomas might not even notice, but it happened. I'm one of several people charged with the success of this program. And from the outset, we were always encouraged or told to help out sister projects, because there were other initiatives like CI/CD, like advancing our artificial intelligence, machine learning capability, like trying to figure out how to park a database on the cloud somewhere. Right. That all of these things were in various stages of operation or dysfunction. Right. And as change management program people that we are at our core, we're there to, we made a point of reaching out to those other projects to help pull them along too, because they face the frozen middle too. That goodwill's been key. It's been coming back to us lots of different ways over the years. We're hitched to each other's wagons now.
Yeah, you guys have really figured out the whole company operations model. It doesn't make sense to have the vertical silos that can't talk to each other. It'd be like sectioning up a factory. Like, oh, the people who put chassis on are not allowed to talk to the engine people, and they're not, like, totally separate. It's like, guys, not workable, not work. Like, if the engine guys are like, we don't like the way these panels are on, it's like, that's not an option. So one of the good things here. So Terry mentions kind of the dependent initiative. So we executed a series of step function initiatives as that transformation from a holding to an operating company happened. We really kind of looked at network consolidation, data center retirement, the modernization of our IT service management and operations management functions, modernization of our NOC, so on and so forth. So we invested about between $40 and $60 million into the organization, knowing that all of these, and this was everything from you know, our A and B plane as a telco, our licensing in certain markets. So some of these were related to our initiative, but we were one of a series of initiatives that were managed from our transformation management office. The ones that were most kind of, I would say, cousins or sisters or siblings to the initiatives that we had were our application performance monitoring, our CI/CD, platform as a service, API gateway, and our multi-cloud initiatives. Those we considered to be one program. We considered those to do, and then what we did was we also said, okay, in this pool of resources, our job is to remove friction from anybody that goes and says, hey, I need to do X, and they get told, well, do you have a PO or PR for that? Right. Do I have to fund this as BAU, or do I have to fund that as a transformation initiative? And we just said, stop worrying about that. That's not your problem. Yeah. We want to remove friction, whether it is the selection and utilization of a database as a service, the utilization of an API gateway, the taking out of a different model to do software development, all of that. We were like, we will. And so when I put my badge on the table and said, I will take this on, I was willing to also take on things that were related to the periphery of the program, because the thing is that it's kind of like physical fitness or an exercise routine. You can't just do the one thing and assume that, oh, I didn't change my diet, so I still died of, high cholesterol or something like that, Yep. But the thing is, we had to deal with like the organization as a whole entity. So I viewed it really much through the lens of three things. So when I moved from chief architect to chief technology officer, I had a remit that also now included product development, but I didn't have a distant relationship from the product development leaders. They knew me from the other work. Right. And so it wasn't like I was some crazy executive that came in with all these ideas about how they were going to run the organization.
And the thing is that they are kind of like family members, meaning that sometimes they have more maturity and capability on software development, and sometimes they have more maturity on their operational discipline. Yeah. And so what we did is those teams that had greater software development, I would say kind of elasticity and kind of how they would approach their processes, we gave them the opportunity to work early when the sausage was getting made and it might not all be worked out, and there might be a firewall rule that you need to kind of work through and so on and so forth. We would work with that team. Whereas the team that was much more operationally rigorous, what we did was we said, okay, that team, we're going to go after them with CI/CD, and they're not going to change their operational process. We're not going to move them onto a platform and so on and so forth. Yeah. So out of a platform portfolio or a product portfolio of about 600 applications, we found that 400 of them were addressable by either this program or CI/CD.
Sure.
And that is everything from mainframe through client-server applications to cloud-native applications, and every kind of event-driven architecture in between. Huh. So going through that process, we just took hey, we'll take all comers. If you have something that we want to be able to do, let's talk. Let's figure it out where it does and doesn't fit and so on and so forth. And we do have some edge cases where it doesn't fit. Like a legacy application that was written in Tickle and it works. Great. I'm not messing with that.
No one's touching it. Yeah. So a big question I have is, again, many customers are in highly siloed organizations. And they would say, hey, congratulations for having a good relationship with the product team, but they don't even respect us. It's not that they won't talk to me, they don't respect us. And so any advice for peers out there who are trying to break the silo and are probably working against the operations stigma, let's say?
So I think that I don't, so my boss gave me a really interesting piece of advice early on. So he took over the role in 2018 and he said, you know what, your job is to make sure nobody's left behind. That's your job. Okay. And so what I would suggest for that operations executive or person that's going to be responsible for the platform is that there is a champion out there, and you need to be able to make sure that when that champion has success, you've added value to their day. You've reduced toil. You've removed impediments to being able to do. Make sure that not only you as that leader, but that executive or person you've added value to their life are willing to stand up on the same stage, same presentation, and talk about it together. Because when we even going back to the bake-off process around our selection around paths, nobody would buy shit from me.
Right.
Because I'm an executive, and they would be like, whatever, dude, you haven't touched code in a long time. Yeah. Don't talk to me. But when they talked to their peers that went through that process, or they talked to architects who could actually write code and understand what this is, they were like, oh, okay, he's saying good things up there, but there's still kind of a distance between our roles in the organization. But the thing is that, Terry and I have both come out of startups where you are taking the garbage out, you're writing the code, you're doing the QA, you're running production, you're dealing with all these kind of things. Yeah. And that sensitivity towards the stuff that's in front of you about managing it, it's not writing the code. Writing the code, building the application, and getting it out into production is one thing. But managing it once it's generating revenue is an entirely different discipline. And understanding kind of how those things come together, we ultimately had to view this as a change program more than anything else. We did not view it as yes, the deliverable was produced by having a technology asset, but it was then the processes that went around and wrapped around that asset. What were the competencies we needed to develop around those things? What were ultimately, what was the culture change that needed to happen to be able to do that? And the way we started was very small. What was the smallest fractal? With that coalition of the willing. Yeah. People understand where this is. And the thing is that most of the time now it's somebody comes to me and they're like, well, we want to use Kubernetes. Okay, come on, bring it on. Yeah. We have a home for you. Yeah. You don't have to, but you also get blue and green deployments. You also get elasticity over the platform. You also get a multi-region set of foundries that have already gone through our security requirements for either regulatory or compliance. Yep. That you now operate in. And I'm like, if you're using a new technology, that either reduces my cost by, X or increases my revenue by Y, I'm going to talk to you about it. I don't have a problem with that. So we as an organization, Intrato as an organization, have workloads running directly on the IS. We have workloads running in our PaaS environment, which is in Pivotal Cloud Foundry, including Pivotal Application and Kubernetes Service. And then we also have applications that, they will only run on-prem and they will never be in the platform.
Yeah.
We consider those all as our operating environment. So very early on, I had a conversation with Rob May, and he talked about what Pivotal Cloud Foundry was and why it was different than Cloud Foundry.
Right.
And the thing that I thought of, and my ultimately the reason why we work with Pivotal as an organization is that you harden open source software for enterprise use.
Yep.
And that is something that I've always been a fan of enterprise or open source software. And one of the things that I believe to my core is that you need to be able to have a relationship with a party outside of your business that can take you down those areas that you won't evolve faster.
Right.
So there have been changes in the Pivotal ecosystem and the product family. And people come to me and like, what do you think about that? And it's like, I expect them to evolve that product so I don't have to.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I'll do our teeny little ad. Last breaking change on the Cloud Controller API was 2013. And we've gone through, we changed out the whole back-end scheduler in that time. And we have not broken that API since 2013. So our goal is to provide you with a moving but stable platform that you can rely on a long time. All right, end commercial.
Yeah, and my platform team, Intrato's platform team, at the end of the day, they don't view this as Pivotal's problem to manage. That platform is Intrato's platform to manage.
Yeah.
It happens to be powered by Pivotal and PivNet and all the applications and so on and so forth that go into it. But we are accountable for that operational stability.
Yeah.
And that, when we look at stability, scalability, security, what is our speed and time to market? And ultimately, how does that translate into whatever we're looking at from the dimensionality of what our business value capture was? It was things like provisioning, releases, elasticity, scaling, all these kind of things. And when I have conversations with product teams, I don't have conversations about how they're developing their product. I'm like, hey, you do you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add these value to you, and you don't have to worry about it. And by using the platform, the right way is also the easy way. And I think that's important.
Yep. I want to keep this at the level of the whole business transformation. I love our tools and I think they're great, but the real function is that ability to culture change across a set of silos. And so, there's a rundown. You gave us a rundown on the executive team. Now, Terry is here. He is the next level down of delivery. And, it's a hard question. I understand you guys have worked together for 15, 20 years, and some of your significant management team has also been with you a long time. But let's just pretend you had to go do this somewhere else. What job roles would you open, and what kind of people would you want to put in those roles?
So I would not put a technology person in.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Not a technology person. Okay.
It would be somebody that is, a facilitator with a change management background who's able to speak to technology people without necessarily trying to out-tech them.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that we all know, and Terry can probably attest to this better than anybody, is that we as technologists sometimes like to be the people that are right or have an opinion about how we're doing things. And if you're able to be like water and work around that rigidity, you're able to move people in a way that's much more effective. So, Terry, what are your thoughts about that?
I would never confuse myself with someone whose job it is to determine how a technology decision gets made. I am never how. I am only what is in the context of being either a product owner, product manager, platform owner, platform manager. And my job is also to remind everyone of why we're doing whatever it is we're doing. So Thomas is right. I get to come in without an ego. My intelligence is not technical, it's systemic. And we're trying to get to a greater goal. And another way that got shopped out too early on, a tactic of culture and change, is And again, I'm not the only one who ended up doing this that works for Thomas, but I was at early stages of the program. Basically, my services were offered to other executives with other initiatives. And that Thomas and I didn't talk about it directly as here's an explicit strategy of Terry, Robert, Colin, whoever, this is what we're going to make you do. But I found myself in service of the people running the legacy platform for a while, that I did a fair amount of water carrying for information security early on. Nice. I jousted with networking in the first year too, that you get in there and you try to help other initiatives, you build that goodwill, because Thomas is providing my project area cover. I've got to give him some capital that he can use with his colleagues too. And that's one of the ways it got done.
Yeah. And that to me, again, this is the secret sauce. So what if I'm an outside person, I'm looking into Intrato, like, how do I do this? Okay. You've got actual connection and background. So a connector, like that makes a lot of sense. And you're going to have to, I call it being a promiscuous pair. You're just going to have to go sit with anyone, sit with you. So, okay. And that makes a lot of sense. And that builds trust. Any advice for an organization that is absolutely silo frozen and is going to thaw
that team. So whoever your change team or transformation team or whatever you want to call them, it is that team needs to be able to thrive on ambiguity and be able to build into that where there is gap, fill it.
Yeah.
And so if you think about if I look at 3 people that I have on my team, I'm going to look at, I have a change person and a facilitator. I have somebody that's got, typically a big 5 view of financial planning and accounting. I have somebody that is extremely technical, like meaning that they are a technical fellow level person. Our architect on this program is, I would say head and shoulders above most.
Okay.
And I would say that, and the other thing is that then you go and you say, we are a team who has this outcome to achieve. We will achieve it together. We will live and die by this initiative being successful. And that notion of extreme ownership ends up being something that is very valuable. I don't have to worry about, we have our lanes. We stay in our lanes. I know that I talk to people very well and I present, and that's what I do. Yeah. But the thing is that I also know that I need somebody that presents to the CFO and their staff in their language. Right. I need technical people to speak to them in their language. Yep. Operators in their language. Yep. And then I need somebody that's able to kind of look at it and go and say, hey, look, for us to be able to get to this end state, we need to be able to have this kind of enablement, learning, communities of interest, communities of practice. How do you tell them, even when you've told them before? So we've built in not only my quarterly all hands or quarterly updates for all my staff, but also we have a digital transformation forum. We had an emerging technologies forum prior to that happened monthly. And these are voluntary meetings where we'll have over 150 people inside the company attend. And so what happens in that is that we do events like this. We speak at conferences. When those events are recorded, we put those directly out on our own internal communications so people can hear about it. Because one of the things is that when people hear things internally, sometimes they're like, hey, yeah, we're doing it. And they get kind of like, they get a little down on it. But as soon as they hear it from outside, they are all of a sudden like, well, oh, wait a second. Oh, that was our people that was talking about that. Yeah. And the thing is that we accept that most of our ideas early on aren't very good. Yep. But we've iterated through them all enough that it's like, hey, you know what? Don Fosgreen, who's one of the people that's on this team, he sat there and he said, not every decision that we made around the platform early on was because it was the right one. It was the right one for right now. Right. And so we've had to go back and revisit certain things. And it's very easy for an organization to go and say, oh, but that's the way it was done. And it was like, well, that was the way it was done because that was the way it had to be done then. Yeah. Not because that's the way it needs to be done now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I learned to do this from Terry. He's like, oh, I do a podcast. And I listen to a couple. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do that. Like, let's do one together. And let's start doing this because your story needs to be told. Okay. So, and Terry and I even talk. So you guys do essentially internal conferences. All that stuff that you're describing is essentially an internal conference. And Terry's point is like, make it swag-tastic as well, right? So it
Mhm.
feels like something, and it feels like binding the company together. And then these internal
Yeah.
voices, these things are not optional. Well, from my point of view, they're not optional. How would you do it without them? Could you?
Well,
I don't think we could.
no. Now, there's extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. You've heard me kind of go on this before, but I'll be very brief about it. App teams, let's say the people who are your product development managers and directors, they're the people who are told to take their application to PCF. And that's an extrinsic motivation because your boss is telling you to. But people work for that dev manager and dev director. These are the people who code. These are the people who want jobs in the future, maybe want to climb up their career ladder. So they want to figure out what's bright, shiny, new, and cool. Yep. And so the intrinsic motivation comes from tool and platform adoption, conference-like experiences, access pathways to the stuff that's out there new, bright, and shiny that they don't often get invited to go see because they're sitting in a cubicle working on a keyboard all day.
Yeah, and they might not be in a market where there's meetups that are fun and those kind of things. Because the thing is that, to just riff on Terry's point a little bit, we table set with the best in class technologies. Nobody could look at what we did and be like, oh, you selected crap technologies.
Right, yeah.
No. We selected the best in class in every map. Then we gave people the tools, training, and community around it to use those tools. And we gave them the opportunity to not only succeed, but if they didn't succeed their first time through, there's a support structure for them to be able to go and say, hey, look, you know what? You were in platform and then you rolled back out of platform because the platform wasn't ready for you. How do we get you to come back? Yeah. And then also look at that experience as like, hey, this is good for me. This is good for my career.
Yeah.
And the thing is that Intrato is not, one of these organizations that sits there and goes, we never want you to leave. We want you to be able to go and say, hey, I choose to stay at this organization.
Right.
You are happening to your career. Your career doesn't happen to you.
Yes.
That's something that I think is really important because I look at it like this. I mean, nobody wants to be in a situation where you're like, look, I just got to drag this boulder up the hill every day. And then, oh, well, got to do it again. That's going to suck. But the thing is it's like, if you, like we have teams that are working in React Native, Flutter, doing all kinds of crazy stuff out there. And I go, look, I don't care.
Yeah.
Do it. Have fun. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
So when products are developed, they are to drive business value. I have three things that are in my remit. The number one is how do I build a hyper-efficient software delivery organization? That's number one.
Yep.
Okay. Number two is how do we build and build a product portfolio that creates customer value and generates the revenue for the business. Okay. And number three is how do we drive valuation for the company? Whether that be through the tools that we use, the evangelism we do in the community, the implications and applications of IoT, AI, ML, blah, 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 so on and so forth. But the reason why is that if I was to go and say, hey, I'm going to build a efficient software development organization, and I'm going to build the products that we want to do, but I'm not going to use public cloud to do it, then that's not driving my valuation discussion. Because when a banker or an investor comes in, they're going to be like, you do what?
Yeah.
Why do you do it that way? And the thing is that now it's those three dimensions. That's how we are evaluated. My executive team is evaluated by where they sit inside that kind of mix. Okay. The hyper efficient. My core engineering team is responsible for the hyper efficient software delivery organization, as is my product development organization. My product development organization is responsible for driving value for our customers. And the valuation discussion is driven largely from my portfolio team and the core engineering team that's being able to set that up. There are other stakeholders throughout that, but the thing is that that's the, you could solve any problem if you have a framework to solve it from. And those are the ones that we come at it with.
Okay. That's novel to me. I haven't heard of, from that perspective, breaking it down like that. So
that's the role of a CTO. If you don't do that, go get a new job. Like especially in an organization like ours, like if any one of those things was not on the table, our CEO would be like, you got to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd offer two dimensions within each of those three charges that ties back to an earlier part of this discussion. I'll go to a tactic. Do you want the app in PCF or do you want that thing to be elastic in PCF? If you're going to get it into PCF, you're going to gain efficiency. But if you're, But if you're going to actually make teams aspire to make things better, more cloud native when they get there, you need to motivate them, find some sort of hook that's an intrinsic motivation. Each one of those remits Thomas has a point scoring metric, KPI type terminology. Shut up, decommission assets to be able to save money here. But then you're in. Is that thing actually more elastic? Are you saving money on the new platform? Are you figuring out how to get to auto scaling so that you can operate more cleanly? You've got to push people beyond their mandate to get there.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
So those two
and
dimensions
by building an engineering mindset, and this is the thing, that like you could have an operator mindset, and then you can kind of look at it. And I'm gonna grind variability out of the system. That's one way.
Yep.
Okay. If you take an engineering mindset, it means that platform is never good enough. You're always going to continue to kind of sharpen the saw.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that we had to hire differently for. Our early team of platform folks, we've had made up of both FTEs, consulting and contract resources, and so on and so forth. We actually now support about 1,600 developers with a team of 6.
Yep.
And that is across North America, EMEA, and APAC. That is in multiple cloud environments. So that's in AWS, Azure, GCP, and private cloud.
Yep.
And that is those, and so we have this notion of application operations, which would be kind of DevOps.
Yep.
We have our platform operations, which is more like SRE.
Yep.
And then we have those teams engaging with all of the other teams, network, TDM, all those kind of folks that are beyond that team.
Yeah. Now let's break down those numbers, because I say this to people and they don't have any context for believing me. Okay. So there's 6 operators worldwide, multi-cloud for just the platform. So that's 6 people. So those are acting like SREs. How many people are in the other organizations? Because let's set some context. Most of the companies we're working with are in the IT headcount of 400 to 2,000.
Yeah.
And so
we have about 2,500 total people in our CIO's organization.
Okay.
So, and then that means that there's, if you think about the functions of product development, core engineering, operations, and I'll call them engineering. So that's network, telco, all the things that we do beyond. So if you think about that, about 1,500 of those are in the product development or core engineering organizations. Okay, so those people are supported by 6 people.
Yeah.
Okay?
The platform.
Now, those 6 people now interact with all those other functions.
Yeah.
Whether that be PMO, data science, InfoSec, network, engineering, blah 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 blah, all those things. Those organizations have their own complexity, and they have to have their own people and resources and NOC and so on and so forth. But we operate as another spoke on that wheel. We don't consider it as a separate. Okay. We don't consider ourselves the hub either.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So,
from my point of view, there's a time frame to consider operations the hub, because they're the one who the productivity revolution smashes into the hardest and first. Because developers don't actually have to change. But when you go from so how many application instances or container instances is how we could talk about it, are those 6 people managing, roughly?
About 11,000.
11,000. And if it went to 110,000 tomorrow, how many people would you need to add to that 6?
None.
So this is the productivity revolution.
Our head of operations and I had to come. So our business case was not Milton, Fritos, and Cokes. Okay, this was dollars. Yeah. And so revenue, kind of shields you from all sins. But when you are in an organization that's in an austerity environment, like many of us are, you have to go and say, hey, where are these savings going to come from? And we made a decision early on that said, hey, we need to take out between 25 and 30% of our total IT cost in this. And the only way that was going to happen is if we fundamentally changed the way and we behaved as technologists. And that meant as engineers, as operators, as PMO, InfoSec, everybody had to change the way they were working. And that included product development might not be the first group that needs to change, but they definitely are a group that has to change.
They do. Yep.
Because they can't go and say, I'm going to deploy 4 times a year at a grain size of X. They need to deploy daily, and they need to do it in very fine grain sizes. And that's a behavior shift for engineering managers.
Yeah.
So in some cases, we had, and like that Adrian Cockcroft, overview of his comment that I made, it wasn't really a quote. It was more just kind of a summary of a conversation. They know what they need to do. We just need to give them the ability to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's our experience, is that developer productivity jumps 4x as soon as they move to a platform. It's just easier to push. They're less distracted for wait time. They don't wander off a project when it's 2 weeks in QA. It's just all of a sudden, there's a 4x jump in productivity for any developer team who wants to even look. And
Terry and I have had this conversation. We don't have yesterday's problems. We have a whole set of new problems.
Yeah.
And the new problems are, they're just like, hey, you know what? We want to do cross-cloud, networking and things like that. And you're like, okay, but I can have that conversation now because I'm not talking about 90 days from VM and procurement.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about those kind of things. I'm not talking about like a QA cycle where it goes over the transom and then people gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Processes around a release, for example, eliminating those.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of things you've done that no other customer really was able to do. So you made the decision to have CI be a first-class thing on Teams. Was that a hard fight? How did you do that one?
So there's 2 ways we approached it. One is that I always kind of view it as that you got to be able to provide value to the team that's actually going to be using it.
Yeah.
So we had to make something easier for them, whether that be eliminate configuration drift, reduce binary management, be able to overlay automated security testing over their source control library, move them to a common Git repository. We selected GitHub and we moved everybody onto GitHub. And then from there, they're like, it was one of those, it was not that controversial.
Okay.
It was like, hey, I'm going to move you from TFS to GitHub. And the thing that you get out of it is also X, Y, and Z and so on and so forth. Right. And then there were teams that were like, we use Jenkins and Ansible Tower. And we're like, you could pry it from my cold dead hand. And I'm like, okay, that's part of our CI/CD stack.
Yeah.
So we actually bifurcate our CI/CD stack where you go on platform. You could use Concourse if you want to, or you could go directly into the traditional stack and then have your endpoint still be pivotal or be directly on the IaaS. We don't discriminate against teams because they don't go through Concourse.
Yeah. Let me ask that then. So there'll be a whole set of people who are like, hallelujah. And then there'll be a whole set of people like, how in the world do you manage the complexity of allowing multiple teams to choose a path like that? And where do you draw? So you did draw the line.
There's two. You could either go, we have, for a summary of it, it goes GitHub, X-Ray, SonarQube, check marks overlaid on that, goes to Artifactory for binary management. Then it goes to Jenkins, Ansible Tower, or Terraform, depending on where you're going.
Fair enough.
Okay. And then from there, you are instrumented with APM at the point of instantiation, so a code commit, as well as also container instantiation.
Okay.
That follows through as part of our CI/CD stack. If you're going into Concourse, it goes GitHub, X-Ray, SonarQube, check marks. Instead of doing Artifactory for binary management, you move into Concourse, and then it follows that Concourse, strongly typed into Cloud Foundry.
Yep.
And we don't care if you're using PAS or PKS at that point.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so you did make a blueprint, a set of blueprint recommendations. So what happens if you go to a team who's doing none of what you just described? How do you coach them? What opportunity do you offer them?
So from an architecture standpoint, we go and say, I don't care that you use these tools. I care that you have these capabilities.
Okay.
So if we buy a company X comes in and they're using all of their own, they made a selection around GitLab over GitHub. They made a selection around Veracode over checkmarks, and they did all these other things and little nuances and difference. I'm going to go and say, you need to be this tall to be on the ride. If you are that tall to be on the ride and you could demonstrate that capability, I am not going to rip and replace any part of your stack.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I want to know why we can't move over.
Yeah.
Over time.
Yep.
So when those contracts die out because of their duration, we need to now look at, did we make the right selection decision? And the other thing is this, and this is the really important thing, is that we also know that this is like a balance sheet. A point in time, we made these decisions based on the technologies at play.
Yeah.
New technologies, new techniques, we are willing, and we have pride of ownership, but we don't have pride of ownership that's going to go and say, we made this call, nothing new can ever happen again.
Right.
We all know that changes at every level of what we do.
Yeah. Okay. That makes tons of sense. And so this is another, you described two different problems that are the modern problem. The first one is you're going to have a decade over decade cycle of your APM changing and your security. Like, we better plan for that. We know that's a fact. So let's just start planning for that now. So that's one of the new problems. And the second thing that's really, it's subtle, but it's the realest thing, which is, hey, we have engaged in now a process. The technical cycle is 2 years or less now. If we pretend like 2016 even was correct, we're just wrong.
Right.
So, yeah, so those are two things I would really highlight, that if you're gonna undertake this, you got to know about that. Any advice?
So the other thing is this, and this is really important, and I think that Terry and the rest of my team will kind of attest to this, is that this is not religion. This is not religion. No. We are not going in saying, hey, you got to be a Java team, a LAMP team, a .NET team. I don't care. I care about outcomes. My boss cares about outcomes. Our board cares about outcomes. Right. Nobody cares about all these things. And if we can go and say, hey, look, we're operating at the outcome level, all of this volatility that happens is something that is having to add value to those outcomes. That's a really important thing from my view. Because it's not like, I can't go and tell a team like, thou shalt write code this way, because they're going to be like, gotta go.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's just so mind-blowing, because you've had to travel the whole path. You're on it. You're halfway through. And the fact that you have a structure that's what I hope to communicate to the rest of the people who are maybe at the foot of the path of where you're at. Will I put my career on the line for this thing?
Yeah, if you aren't, the thing is that, if you don't work in technology if you don't like change, because it's just not the right spot for you. It's just, it always changes. It's just whether you're an engineer, a quality professional, an executive, a director, it doesn't matter, anywhere in it. Everything we do, 5 years ago, everything we did was different. Okay. 2 years ago, I would argue everything that we did was different. And the thing is that we're going to have to learn something new at every point. The other thing is that you had asked before we got started about kind of the durability and what happens if you leave or somebody leaves on your team. We don't view people leaving on our team as the end of our relationship with them. Because, for example, we just had a key person on our team move on to pursue other opportunities. And we were actually like helping them, like, dude, it won't work out with us, but let's figure out how it works out so we can continue to have that relationship. And I think those are things that are really important. But it's also the case that if I was gone today, win the lottery, move on, do whatever, rock and roll, this program is still going to sustain. It's not like there's like, oh, you took out 3 people and, it's an avalanche and the program will stop. The thing is that what we've got to do is, we've all kind of taken this notion of we must train ourselves out of the job.
Yeah.
And by being able to kind of work with ambiguity, being able to go and say, hey, you know what? The decisions today might drive the business from a consolidation model to a disaggregation model, blah, 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 blah. You can't go and say, oh, I'm out, can't do it. That's not going to work for me. It's got to be durable beyond. And I think that's the reason why we dealt with it from more of a process perspective. So
it looks like you enculturated it. And so, boy, we could talk all day about that.
It's in process. I mean, the thing is that I think that, and Terry can probably speak to this better than I can, I think that we've passed the tipping point. People will not revert back to the old behaviors. They've seen it.
Agreed.
They would wholesale revolt if the organization reverted back to the old way.
Top, middle, and bottom. I think you'd have the VPs that run your product development teams, your operations teams. They would not let us abandon a platform as a service product like PCF now. No way. They've got skin in the game now too.
I like this. Top, middle, and bottom. When you reach the tipping point at top, middle, and bottom, then you know you have a durable culture. And because the reality is that technical executives change every 2 or 3 years. And so, and I'm already seeing this in the folks that I work with in the field. Like we get someone trained up and everyone, got a champion, the whole 9 yards, and then one or all of them move on. Someone decides they all need a raise because they know PCF, and just like a whole group of people will just exit it. And so
we've had this happen in our organization where we've had people that become marketable beyond their current pay in our organization. And, for some reason or another, we're not able to match what they're able to get out by going to someplace new. But one of the things that I think is that if you have the new skills that you've learned on our team and you've gone and taken them elsewhere, that's not a bad thing for us.
Yeah,
that's a good thing for us. Because people don't look at us as like, every organization's got kind of their challenges. And the thing is that when you're in the inside, the two best places are your last and your next. Yeah. But the thing is that we're trying to make where we are the best.
Yeah.
And while we're here, it can't be one of those things that is just a drag to work on every day.
Yeah. I'm extremely inspired by West because you guys actually care about the line level and how they work and their life. And it's like, I don't find that often. And no one is managing like you're managing there at that line level, which is, hey, we want, it almost sounds like to me that you bet your career on this change. This change is coming to the whole industry, and you're willing to be a flag bearer for the industry. And so
I'd say Pivotal gets it too, though. Like recently, we've had a suggestion from some of the pivots that work with us every day to actually hold what amount to office hours at certain times a day so that we can make sure that the line level engineers in India have a forum where they can get their questions answered in real time.
Awesome.
And we help those people, but I didn't think about just holding synchronous meetings with them. So the pivots get it too.
Yeah. I hope.
To get an idea of the scale of Intrato as an organization is we have 48 teams in 24 geographies. We have those teams range from anywhere to ±2, 7 ±2.
Yeah.
So they could be as small as 5, as high as 9. They could be multiple teams working on a single platform, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're all co-located in the same geography at all. So for example, part of my voice platform team runs out of Toronto, the Toronto land area, and then another portion of that runs out of Sydney, Australia. Right. So they need to manage those timelines and time blocks. Yeah. I've got teams in Tel Aviv, Nuremberg, Germany, Leicester, England. Yeah. So you've got kind of this, we are a global organization. And so when we look at this, we can't just go and say office hours are at 9 o'clock Pacific on, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Because the thing is that, in Tel Aviv, Friday's the Saturday.
Yeah.
So.
Gentlemen, this conversation could go on, and Thomas, maybe we'll pull some stuff out of this to do more discussions, because every one of these is critical. So thank you very much for your time. Any parting words or things you want us to know?
Yeah, I think that, if people have questions or want to dive into one of these areas that, we could do as birds of a feather, I'd be happy to do it. So.
Great. Well, thank you. All right, gentlemen. Have a great afternoon. We will talk to you next time.